Hey, I'm on camera just to show that I am here in human form. I was trying to build a digital twin of myself in Copilot Studio to run this session. We're not there yet, but it's great to meet all of you and present on this topic. AI, right? The evolution or the journey of AI began even in years predating my birth, so over 20 years ago. And that's really the phase zero on this slide, right? And this whole discipline has grown, of course, in what I call phase zero. It was led by data scientists, right? People smarter than me and Sarah who really understood how to put this picture together. And then, of course, Gen AI landed a few years ago, and the world changed, right? So we're now challenging, all of our customers to join the journey to becoming a frontier firm, okay? And it's using all of that hard work that, from those that came before us to meet people exactly where they're at in the journey and to align to drive, human productivity, right? But then also business process. And those two really, really go hand in hand, right? So if you were on our prior series call where we looked at Copilot Studio Lite, that was really about the human having an assistant, right? Building their own agent. No code. We call that no code, right? And then ultimately going into, human-led agents, things that you've maybe heard of, researcher, Microsoft analyst agent, the sales Copilot agent, right? These are agents that are still, supporting and surrounding that, the person to help them with their work. And then the natural extension to that is really, this conversation with the product that we call Copilot Studio Full, where it allows us to build agents that drive entire end-to-end business processes or support entire end-to-end business processes that know when a process starts. They know what's happening in between. Think of something like a quote to cash process or a collections process or any kind of process. Right, that's a human-led, agent-operated, typically a full Copilot Studio agent. So, of course, in Copilot Studio, we are building on Microsoft. Right, it's connected to literally everything. Right, whether these are legacy applications that you have in your company, the full Microsoft stack, of course, but then connectors really across any kind of system. Anywhere in the world. So, right. And your agents, as we start to get into this, we're going to get a little bit sophisticated in this session, but they can go from simple to sophisticated. And really the hallmark of Copilot Studio is we have underpinning governance, things that we've had as Microsoft that predate Gen AI, right, that we've used in Dynamics going back over 20 years, that we've used and developed over that time to really help govern and scale low code software. And that really is the promise of Copilot Studio, right? This is the tool that we use to democratize AI, right? To take those hard investments that were made, for those that came before us, put you on that frontier journey, and then link those investments into a low code agent to go better and faster in your delivery of AI. So I'm just going to cover a couple of success stories here. I think it's always good to kind of ground on what's been done, right? All of our customers are adopting in some fashion AI, right? And they're exploring, they're evaluating. But here, Dow Chemical with Copilot Studio now processes over 100,000 annual invoices through AI, right? So they're reading, they're extracting, they're classifying, they're handling all these kind of AI functions to really understand what's on that invoice, and then look at the exceptions and the end-to-end process to, handle this function, right? Prior to having AI, there were older school OCR technologies. They just didn't really fit the bill. Now AI can handle this autonomously for Dow Chemical, right? Cineplex, 5,000 consumer requests for refunds, right? 1,000 a month, and they've achieved an 80% reduction in handling refund requests. Again, reading emails, right? understanding what the request is, processing that with automation in an autonomous way, and then bringing humans in behind to support where needed, right? So this improves customer service, customer satisfaction, by getting timely responses to my inquiries, right? And then something we'll touch on a little bit here in the education side in this session, University of Hong Kong, right? A dynamic learning environment for almost 40,000 students, right? 13,000 admin staff and faculty. They've looked at the end-to-end student life cycle, right? And they've started with course registration, but giving that student a co-pilot that can, help them in their journey of education. And I think that's a topic that we should all be kind of inspired by, right? Leveling up human talent in this age of AI. So this kind of brings me to my demo. We'll look at kind of that jumping off point where we go from a low code agent or a no code agent to a pro code or to a low code, right? From Copilot Studio Lite and then jumping off into Copilot Studio Full. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but the basic construct here is that, hey, I've got a somebody who's the next generation of knowledge workers, right, or even frontline workers, and they want to learn about aircraft. Well, their starting point from an enterprise skilling perspective was to upload manuals, right? Manuals about an airframe and general aviation and the engines on aircraft. And these are large manuals. They're 150 megabyte style manuals. Well, the old school way to learn these would be to start reading, from the first sentence to the last, across these handbooks and what have you. So just an end user now to help themselves out has created something like a test prep buddy, right? And just by simply linking in those manuals, giving some instruction to the agent, they can ask questions, drill really, front to back, side to side across this knowledge to learn everything about an aircraft, right? In a general sense. So, tell me about the airframe structure of an aircraft. Well, I don't know any of this stuff, but AI sure could tell it to me, and it could cite the evidence of what I was looking up, in those manuals. So pretty straightforward. Well, maybe in this story, this user has been, this has been so successful. Maybe he shared it out to a few people on his team. Maybe they want to do more and they want more power behind this agent. This is where I would take this agent with these manuals and I would convert this from a no code or a light agent to a Copilot Studio Full agent. Okay. So that button is right here. It's newer in the last kind of month here with Microsoft to be able to say, hey, that work that you did to set this up, to give instructions to your agent and knowledge, right? So these are the two core things that a low code or a Copilot Studio Lite agent allows us to do, right? Create something that I can reuse, give some instructions like you see here. I won't read them out loud. Use short bullets. Help me learn, avoid jargon, right? Point to SharePoint, point to public websites. You see SharePoint's referenced here, and go and share, right? And then expand. Okay. Okay, so that is the light version of Copilot Studio, and it comes with your M365 license. You can also build agents that are what we call using Copilot Studio Chat, right? So I'm in the Copilot Studio app here. I could be in Teams, kind of having that same experience with this agent. I could be licensed for M365, or if I'm using public knowledge in my agent, that's a free tool for everyone in your organization. We encourage you to explore that, right? To do this kind of a basic agent setup on public knowledge. Okay. So let's take this to the next level, right? So we were very successful with our knowledge agent, but we wanted to kind of expand on that and bring more tooling around the learning process. So one of the things that I like to do, this is kind of a personal preference, but I like to bring a flavor of a UI, right? I have this concept of what I call stage fright, right? You call the bank and you get into the IVR and they say, tell me what you want to do. And you always want to do something that's not on the list of the 3 options that they gave you. That's why you're calling them, right? So give a little bit of structure, right? The goal here is to put some structure around the learning process, take what we had in those manuals, roll it into something like a course catalog, allow for some quizzing, interactive quizzing within the agent, show some reports on progress, right? And really, go deeper into the learning process, even to the point of evaluating and scoring and tracking our progress towards learning. So, this is, just kind of a concept, right? We create this in Microsoft ecosystem, in Microsoft Copilot and Teams, using what are called adaptive cards. Now, they can be a little intimidating when you look at an adaptive card. And I'm not a pro code person, right? There's a lot of, it looks like code, right? But, I just use M365 Copilot and say, this is what I want to do. Create me this, and it gives me the code, and I slap it in, and you get this kind of an experience, right? And then that goes further, right, into structured data, right? What are the courses that we want to offer in our study buddy here? I'll just zoom out a little bit. Whole set of courses, right, that are kind of clickable, linkable. And again, this is, just adaptive card experiences that we're bringing into this agent to give kind of this a different flavor than just pure Gen AI. But of course, when I get down to these lessons, and there are, hundreds and hundreds of lessons here and lesson blueprints and what have you, now the Gen AI is kind of taking off, right? When I choose a lesson, now I'm going out to those documents. I'm going out to the lesson blueprint to craft really tailored and smart content, directional, right? Being tracked A to Z, right? And this is all based on the instructions that I fed that agent, very similar to what I did before, to kind of learn at a deeper level on this topic, right? And hey, there's some mini practice here, right? The agent was instructed to find mini practice. It does some self-check, if you will, and then even goes on to do a quiz, right? A multiple choice or write in the answer style quiz, right? We can literally quiz, grade, score, evaluate, right through the agent. So it's a little bit of the art of the possible here. Just one last thing. We do have in agents when we're running in the channel of Copilot Studio or Copilot or Teams, we can provide starter prompts, right? That's pretty common, but maybe you want to have a little more interactivity where your adaptive card gives you, some direct interactivity, right, to kind of launch a starter prompt through a tailored way. So it's just another way to get to the same kind of objective. Okay. So, well, how is this done? I'm going to spend about 10 minutes and just kind of go under the covers a little bit here on how we build for, using the tools of a studio agent. Okay. So the key thing in a Copilot Studio agent is use of the orchestrator. Okay. The orchestrator is basically those instructions that we give to the agent that tells the agent how to pull in the right tool at the right time. Okay. That could be, use knowledge, use other tools, use these topics to kind of, give the flavor of the experience that we want to create, right? It recognizes the question that's being asked to AI. We call that intent. And then it routes the intent to the right tool or the right agent. So even in Copilot Studio, we have this concept of multi-agent, and even now agent to agent that allows us, these agents to really start to talk each other and take center stage in your business process. Okay. The agent has the guardrails. Those are supported through the orchestrator. It's going to tell you no if I try to do something harmful to the aircraft, right? In that prior example, the agents can run autonomously, and in a little bit I'll show you some autonomous agents that do some really interesting things. That just means they run on their own without a human intervening. They run independently. And then there are flavors of orchestration. We're showing two here, right? Generative orchestration. I encourage you all to practice saying that word. It was hard for me a few years ago to say generative. I now can do it. It took a lot of practice. And then traditional automation, right? Think of the traditional automations that you have in your business that you've run for, years and years and years. They can run through this same platform as one automation platform. And then we have what's called hybrid. And hybrid uses a flavor of both of these to deliver the right experience. Sometimes when you're in the agent building, because this is all about practice. To become proficient in building agents, you do need to practice, right? So invest, lean in a little bit, but you'll get a flavor for you'll start to sense when you're in that mode of AI is doing more of the thinking and the mapping of data versus I'm using a very deterministic way to say if then else in my agent, right? You want that more control and that traditional flavor. Both are there, and that's great to know, right? So hey, just some other tools really quickly. Knowledge, right? You see when you go into Copilot Studio and you click on knowledge, this will all light up. You see all these options here. It wasn't until a little over a year ago we had a lot of structured knowledge where the AI itself is writing the queries, finding the knowledge that you want to pull out of things like Dataverse, which is, of course, the database behind Dynamics, right? It's also the database behind Power Platform. Ask questions about Dataverse, use these tools to update Dataverse with very, very little effort, right? And the needed control, right? So, lots of knowledge sources. Other tools are here, right? AI prompts. When you start working here, you use this all the time to pass in data, pass in documents, create structure out of that data and documents that you want, or create answers, or create documents themselves, or even create reports out of the AI prompts, right? If you've done automation in the past with Microsoft, you've used Power Automate. Those are called cloud flows. When we wrap those same automations into AI agents, we call them agent flows. And we give you newer capabilities there for things like human in the loop, right? That's just one example of where we're adding more on top of to kind of prepare customers for the agentic future, okay? We have connectors, right? Back to things like Dataverse, but really to any system to say, hey, I've kind of navigated across this domain of this agent, and I've got a whole set of data that I need to do something with. Well, let's connect to a system and let's update or create, or if you allow that control, delete, from those external systems, and just map that data in using AI to find that tool and perform that process in the right way. It works really well. We have to talk about two more here, right? And I'll just jump to these slides. Computer using agents, right? We've had out for about 6 months now, right? Here I'm just, I'm looking at a backend system, like a website, right? And I'm providing some instructions to say, hey, go out to this website, find invoices, take data that the agent has extracted and perform updates, right directly through that back-end website, like a hosted experience, using AI vision to know exactly where to get data from and put data to. When you go into this tool, you'll see some examples that you can kind of try out, right? You type in, 3 sentences of instructions, and it'll go out and show you kind of how to use some of these tools in a very, very user-friendly way to, push your data and pull data from external systems right through the browser interface. So, and then MCP is something we've had now for probably about a year. I mean, this has become a very popular protocol for AI to connect to knowledge servers. And you see there are many, many of these here. Dynamics is one of those knowledge servers, Dataverse. I won't go down the whole list, but this is really, really an emerging space where we can allow you to specifically control questions and updates to backend systems in just strictly a natural language flavor. So if I wanted to know what my top 10 opportunities were from last week, right, I can just ask that question to AI, and this server will go find that answer from that knowledge source and give you that answer. And then maybe you want to take, one of those top 10 and update one of those records. Say, hey, update, the quote line on this, from 3,000 units to 4,000 units. And the MCP server will actually perform those actions for you. It'll find the underlying APIs and just with natural language handle that kind of A to Z for you. So very, very popular, an emerging tool for use in your agents. So let's go in and just go under the covers just to show a flavor of these tools. I won't go deep in this, but I do want to show a flavor of these tools. So
Kevin, there are a couple of questions in chat. Can we pause and answer those? You want to save them to the end?
Let's pause and answer those.
Okay. So the first question in chat is, where can we get information on developing adaptive cards for our AI UI? Do you have any suggestions on where people can get that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, M365 Copilot is your friend, right? Use Copilot chat to ask that question. Now I'll show in the UI where that actually shows up. We'll just spend 2 minutes on this because it is part of the, what I promised to show. Like, let's get into the software and take a look. So maybe. Yep, here we go. So I'm in my agent here. I'm in Copilot, right? This is where I built, and I have instructions and knowledge and tools. Well, your adaptive cards come from a few places. They come as a response from a tool, or they can be embedded in objects. So my tool can go out and it can do things like, get lesson data, right? And then basically this is using an aligned cloud flow, our agent flow called get lesson data, right? It's plugged into this tool. And then my output is, is the data itself, but the output can be an adaptive card, right? Send as an adaptive card. But I wanted this card to be a little more interactive and handled in a little bit different way. So I have this in another tool to get this output, right, as the data, and then pass it into the card through a topic, right? So I'm blending kind of topics and tools in this setup that I did. And, if I'm displaying lessons, well, I'm getting the data, right? So now we have this declarative set of steps that we're using to say, when this is called, display lessons based on the selected module, go get that data from Power Automate and parse it out and then put it into an adaptive card, right? And the bindings all occur here in the properties. So this is what AI gave me, right? And I just put it in there. I said, here are the fields that I'm trying to create, and I want it to look pretty, and I want the title to be blue, and, and pass in, the binding. There's another last thing I'll just mention here. There's some schema and binding. You have to be kind of familiar at this level to create that experience. And then based on what's selected, I returned out, what was the buttons that were selected, basically, or the choices that were made from that card. Okay. And so these are, it's really those two areas, right? Topics, where I can directly call an adaptive card, or tools where I can make the adaptive card the output of the tool.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe do one more question and then we can move on. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's take another question.
Okay, how does Copilot Studio fit in the puzzle with Azure AI Foundry?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think when we look at that phase 0 of AI evolution, right, with those data scientists building, and even 2 years ago, right, there was a lot of investment from our customers in, further building custom agents for their business, right? Many of our customers would have their own proprietary knowledge agents, right, that they built for, purpose built for their business. And that's great, right? That involves a certain A, pro code skill set to build, and B, it requires infrastructure, right? So infrastructure means I'm building out my infrastructure, building it for the right scale, right? In Copilot Studio, we're a SaaS solution, meaning Microsoft takes care of all of that for you, right? It's just plug and play. So when we're linking, because I did say, hey, these agents deploy to the Microsoft 360 side, right? They can deploy to other channels through Copilot Studio. But when I look at my prompts here, and I'll just pull one of these here, the quiz question generator, like, hey, take this knowledge and create a 5-question quiz for students on this topic, right? And pass in the variable. Well, the option here in this prompt is, I'll just expand out the prompt. It's right here. Lots of power here under the prompt side. But I actually choose the model that I want to have service this prompt, right? So it could be, an Anthropic model, right? It could be kind of these OpenAI models. These are the ones we provide, or you can go directly to Foundry, right? And pull in Foundry as a model or Foundry as a tool into your Copilot experience, right?
Wonderful, thank you.
And in fact, this is kind of the pathway to channel delivery, and I'll just say this, like governance. Governance is a big topic, right? We all want to know what's out there, who's created what, how is it performing, how's it being used. It's really an area that the low code AI does a great job of, because it's very, we've invested in it for over 2 decades, right? So if we're looking to take that, that pro code Foundry agent and put it in the hands of end users in M365 chat, this could be an easy way to do it, where I kind of wire it in, wrap it with some other tools, and then deploy to the M365 channel, right? So when you look in Copilot Studio, you have all of these channel options provided, right? So I just clicked over here in the plus sign, and you see, the Microsoft channels are here, right? We all know what these are: Teams and SharePoint and M365 Copilot. I'm authenticated as a Microsoft user, and the agent is being surfaced, through those channels. A lot of our customers are using Copilot Studio to build B2C agents, right? Ask my company, right? Get information, learn more about my account, learn more, without having to write traditional applications. We can surface through native apps, handhelds, web apps, portals, right? With our own flavor of authentication, Microsoft or otherwise, to serve these apps. We can surface through APIs, right? The agents. So what's happening now is we're seeing customers with Foundry agents wrap them in a Copilot Studio agent and then deploy them directly to the channel. So it's all under one governance umbrella.
That's great. Thanks, Kevin. We'll go ahead and pause on the questions and you can proceed.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Sarah. So, so basically our tool chest has expanded quite a bit beyond what we have from the M365 Copilot Studio Lite. Both are Copilot Studio, right? This is just the full version. It allows us to, to go deeper into the tooling, get into things that we call like multi-agent, where, I have a specific agent that gives a lesson or that generates quizzes, kind of a first party type of activity that we want to kind of fold into the experience, right? As we start to build these agents out. We also have in the platform, and I'll just kind of quickly touch on these, right? Knowledge, tools, agents, topics. I've shown a flavor of all of those. But when you're running, this is really important for a user kind of getting started in here. You can see I was up at 5 a.m, running my agent to make sure it ran, right? You have kind of 2 panels for testing within the studio experience. So when I say that, you see that they're right up here in the top right. This area is your friend, right? If I want a new, fresh start on my agent, I just did a fresh start there by clicking that button, start a new test session. We'll talk in a little bit about evaluation. Earlier, I talked about the generative orchestration mode, and then the track between and the declarative mode, or excuse me, the deterministic mode of topics, right? Topics were the tool that underpinned our earlier platform of bot platform, right? Pre-AI. Think of this as like more of a phone tree, right? It still brings a lot of value, and we still use those. But if you have both of these on and your agent is kind of bouncing between, the generative mode and the topics mode, you'll just see that in the test results where you're either following a flow or the agent is doing more of a generative work on your behalf. So just be aware of that. There are times when when you're building, turn these off, and there's times when you want to have one on. There's times where you want to have both on, right? And then when we look at autonomous agents, that's covered, and I'll cover this as a next topic, but that's covered through what we call test triggers, right? Now, this is not an autonomous agent, but I can run them from here, right? So that I can reuse something that happened. I received an email, a record was updated in Salesforce, a new employee was created in Workday, right? Those are triggers that can cause the agent to launch and run, right? The data is passed in, the instructions read the data that's passed in as that activity, and the work is then performed kind of across this tool set. Hey, and then just one last thing here. I said I'd mention it. It's the evaluation side, right? This is for how do we know the quality of our agent before we launch it out to the field, right? So I want to build a test set, right? Now this already, AI can do that for you, right? I'm going to encourage you to use AI to build, whether you're doing it in the tool here or you're doing it in M365 Copilot to say, I've got this agent, I need to test it against expected results, right? Let's get a quick question set or a full set or my set, and then, run the tests, right? To show, did we 100% get to the expected result? Was it good enough or did it fail? And of course, we need to work on those last two categories then, right? To get to perfection. So it's great that this is integrated into the tool. Related to this as well is then just maybe, I'm going to keep saying it's the last thing I'll cover here, but this settings area in Copilot Studio is your friend, right? This tells you whether or not you want to be, have generative work within your agent. You would choose yes here. But it also allows you to do content moderation down here, right? Like the level of specific rules that you want to have to moderate your content, right? And restrict certain questions from being asked, right? So there's a slider there. There's specific tooling you can provide there. And then there was one other thing here related to feedback. So I'm just not seeing it. I'm going to user feedback, right? So if I enable this, I get the kind of the thumbs up, thumbs down experience, right? Within my agent that's running in M365, Copilot or SharePoint. And then that feedback, thumbs up, thumbs down, is used to, in a feedback loop to help improve the quality of your results. Okay. But it's there as part of every question. If your first prompt is hello, you're gonna take feedback on whether people liked or didn't like hello. So I think it should be an option on each interaction and not on every interaction. But yeah, that's the user feedback. Wanted to point that out as well. Okay. So that's really the platform overview, right? We started with just setting the stage for why low code agents. We talked about this agent, which was just kind of a generic study buddy agent that had some kind of bells and whistles, right? And we kind of looked at the surface area of how you build, right, across knowledge and tools agents. I do have another agent that I'd like to show on the autonomous side and talk through. But Sarah, do we have any other questions, or do we want to run another quick poll?
We have a couple of other questions. Let's see. How can someone use Copilot Studio in a sandbox environment to practice and experiment without being
Mhm.
connected to enterprise data like SharePoint and Dataverse?
Yeah, great question. So we encourage users to start with developer environments. We encourage users to stay out of the default environment, right? We want to see and so we'll talk just a little bit about the admin center here. But we want to see ultimately that you have, a formal dev, right, and a formal test and a formal prod for your agents. And those all follow the standard deployment models, right, for AI and for Power Platform, right? I'm here in the Power Platform Admin Center. But when we look at your environments, you'll have something called the potential to have something called a developer environment. So your IT can help you set these up so that if you go to create something in Copilot Studio and you're authorized, right, that they put you into what's called a developer, single user or single plus one environment, right? And they'll put the right kind of controls around which data you should be allowed to access through what we call data policies and even advanced connector policies. Um, yeah, so that's kind of the answer there. I don't think I have all the privileges here to create an environment, and that's why I'm locked out on that one. But yeah, so start with the developer environment. You'll also want to have one other thing. You might want to be in a group that's enabled to build agents, right? So that shows up in the admin center if you are a Power Platform admin, or you know one. If you don't know who your Power Platform admin is, that's homework for you, right? Get to know who that person is, or people, right, who can kind of activate some of this for you. And then you'll have in your specific environment, there's something called tenant controls for it. It's usually here. Um, yeah, I don't have the right setup for this user, but there's something called a Copilot Studio users group, right? That gets you into Copilot Studio without a license, right? You don't need a license to build, but you do need to be either have the license assigned to you, which is free, or you need to be in that group called Copilot Studio admins, right? That's linked through the admin center to kind of enable you to kind of build in this space. So those are the kind of the two entry points.
Okay, awesome. Um, we have another question here. Okay, so in creating an agent, which is, let's see, which is created in M365 Copilot app that's giving us more. Okay, so it looks like they're creating an agent in M365 Copilot um, that's giving them more accurate results than the agent that's created in Copilot Studio without really knowing the use case. Do you have any thoughts on
Yeah.
maybe might be why that might be?
Yeah, so there's two things that come into play here. So first of all, the graph grounding, so when we create an M365, we're using what's called the Microsoft Graph, to better understand kind of what the user has permissions to 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 you know to use, right? But it gives specific tuning, right, for Microsoft tools under the M65 graph. Our product group is really working to bring these into parity, and it's been kind of a stair step, right? Because they are two different AI engines or two different RAG models at the end of the day. One of the things that I've heard, but I haven't seen, is that in our agent, if we link knowledge this way, that we might get better results from things like SharePoint, which is obviously a common use case, right? Point to SharePoint as knowledge. Um, but if I upload my SharePoint this way, it actually changes the engine from graph grounded knowledge into Dataverse RAG, and it has a different engine, it has a different tuning and level of sophistication. So try this is what my advice would be. where we link. Now, what happens when we do this, the timing for that knowledge runs more on a batch process within Microsoft. So it has a X number of hour kind of refresh interval, but it might give you better results.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, we can also take this offline if I have a couple ways for you to get in contact with us, and we can answer more questions that you might have. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, great.
So up to you. I have a couple more questions, or you can move on.
Yeah, let's go with the questions, and maybe you can run the poll if you have a third poll. I don't know if you do, Sarah, but
I do. Yeah. Okay. So while I'm getting that poll ready, I would love to know regarding making the agents speak.
yeah, absolutely, it's a capability, right? And when we look at our channels here, voice is a channel. Now this is an autonomous agent that I flipped over to, but we have direct line speech as an option here, and we have escalation as well, right? So if you are in a text kind of a chat, so I'm just going to mention, I'm going to go, this isn't the question, but if you're in a agent and you want to do an escalate to representative, right? Earlier I mentioned the bank scenario where you call and you're kind of left on stage and you just need to talk to somebody, right? Copilot Studio is a bit unique in that it offers escalation to Dynamics service, to Salesforce, to ServiceNow, or even a custom engagement hub. So that's speak to person, right? But what we also do is we put these agents, as your IVR, as part of this experience. So in that case, it's, the same design and the same design concepts come into play, right? Use your enterprise data, instruct your agent, find your tools, authenticate the user, know who they are when they come to talk to you, right? Allow them to ask questions about any of their data that you allow them to have access to or your knowledge, right? So that's all possible through Copilot Studio. What we do is we don't want to give, you saw in the study buddy, paragraphs and paragraphs of knowledge. Well, nobody wants to sit and listen to the book on tape when they're on the phone, right? Maybe Sarah does, but so we tune the response just with a master flag that says voice. It's in here somewhere. Here it is, right? Optimized for voice, right? So now it's going to work with DTMF codes, right? We're going to instruct to be more crisp in our narrative, conversational narrative when we're going through a voice channel. And then for each generative response, it's another tool within Copilot Studio. Through the topics tree anyway, we can tune that response to voice. So I'll just open up this one here. Right. So if I were on, we have a node in here called the Gen AI node where we can, take some bit of information and quickly, spin off a response, right, in a certain way. And I can kick this into speech mode, I think is one of the options here. Optimize for, yeah. So it's in here somewhere. I guess I don't know everything about the product, so yeah, it's in here, right, to actually further optimize the response for voice within these nodes as well. So good. Other question, Amy?
Yep. We have a couple. So how can I store the data retrieved from the Copilot agent's response to a prompt into SharePoint list automatically?
I guess I would need some context, but it sounds like we want that response to be output and then stored into a SharePoint. Right, and we see this all the time, right? SharePoint and Dataverse and how to get, how to decide between these two data sources. But if I get response out from a prompt like we have here as a tool, I'll just open up this one. This one's called the email metadata extraction prompt, right? So what we're doing on this autonomous agent is we're reading all the emails that come in on shared mailboxes. And we're looking at that output like this, right? Like, I read, 300 emails or 158 emails here. I happen to be in Dataverse, right? And I'm trying to figure out how to route them using an autonomous agent, right? So I'm going to group by, were these emails related to, the sales desk or to service, right? Or returns or partner support or order management? They're just emails, right? With attachments and all of this stuff. So this autonomous agent will kind of start to support order management. Well, we do this by taking the email and putting it into a prompt, right? The email body, the email attachments, and extracting this output to get this in a structured format that we can then map to SharePoint. If I just want the JSON itself, it is an output option on the prompt. So here I'm in the tool. I'm, in my prompt right now. What's interesting is it gives this, it's in line here, right? This prompt, but I can kind of expand it out up here. And this is where the whole thing kind of lights up, right? So given email content, well, there's some sample data, right? It's just for my one-time use. I'm outputting as structured data. Okay, so it's an output from the prompt. And, you see the instructions here. It knows about our business. It knows how we want to start to classify. And if I test that prompt, I get structured output JSON. And you'll see the result here in 3 or 4 seconds. And then in this agent, I happen to be passing it into passing that output directly into a connector, right? But you could use another agent flow to pass this output to anywhere, really, right? So there's the output, right? We have our message ID from Exchange, right? And we have, the company name extracted. There's lots of magic here, right? Who the contact is from that email, right? The reply to email. And then, across the whole business, what are all the options for everything that could possibly be asked in this one response structure? Now, in this agent, right, that processed bulk email across shared mailboxes, I've instructed this to say, this is actually the prompt, but the instructions say at the orchestrator level out here, process the inbound email from the trigger, meaning the email's arrived, it's triggered here. Let me show the trigger really quick. And so it's above the instructions. So it's up here. Trigger is the Copilot shared mailbox, right? Everything routes into one mailbox. I can reuse this trigger here. Earlier I showed where that was on the test, but I can click, 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 watch it run. And when done, and this is actually important here, because if I say, and also create the record using the create email track record, I think this will run in parallel, right? Both will try to happen at the same time, but I want it to wait until that's done before I do that. So I instruct it that way, right? Then pass it directly into Dataverse. That's it.
Okay, awesome.
And and then use the knowledge here, right? It says here are all the classification rules, right? That give you even more knowledge for how we want to kind of see that output come out. So.
Wonderful. This will be our last question, and then we should wrap up. Do you mind taking this last one?
Let's do it, yeah.
Okay, we built an agent and added a SharePoint site, but the agent says it can't see the site. And the knowledge, it says it's preparing. Does this mean it's reading the SharePoint files and semantically digesting the information?
Typically, no. So I think what you're probably finding here is, of course, you've probably looked at access, right? That the user who's creating has access to SharePoint. But the first place I would start there is looking at the authentication of the agent, right? So that's over in the settings. When you open settings, you have to go back. You have to close. You have to close here. So I'm just pointing that out because if you go back here, you'll become frustrated, right? So open and close right over here, and then we have security. So your security should be authenticated, right, as Microsoft. Okay, that's the first thing for SharePoint. The second thing is that you could have strict IRM policies on using that knowledge, right? If it's classified as confidential, right at the library level or what have you. That's something we'll need to dig a little bit deeper into. So those two things can come into play. So try something. The advice here is just try something more basic, right? That just says it's a basic instruction, it's a basic connection. You have authentication on. You got some pretty clean data in SharePoint. That doesn't have a lot of information rights management policies in play. Run water through it, and then start to level up from there to diagnose. If it's still not working, like you can open up a ticket, right? Like with Microsoft, and they can go a little bit deeper into telemetry and things like that to understand what's happening.
Yeah, and this I'm the one that's made that statement. So what's going on is the person that I'm working with created the agent. We created it right in the SharePoint site itself.
Yeah. Hey, that's an M365 agent, right? It's a Copilot Studio Lite. Yeah.
So that could be, and I've done this before for other times, and it was weird that it was said it was preparing the folder. I'd never seen it say that before. So I was just wondering, like you said, there's some access rights. If it's saying it's preparing something, it's not seeing it, then maybe I can just, for a test, I can take a link to a certain folder and put that in the prompt and let it act on that folder link to see if the permissions are okay, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
And you're saying, yeah, for authentication, I wouldn't have access to this level unless I had them go back to their Copilot Studio, find this agent that was developed and look at authentication, like you're saying.
Yeah, if it's created through SharePoint, it's probably not landing on the full version here. It's landing on the light version for that user, and more under the control plane of Agent 365. That's where you would go to find that. And then you'll have that option if you wanted more tooling beyond that basic knowledge agent, right? So there's kind of three ways to get to it, right? If you wanted to try it this way, you could build this way. If you wanted more of that tooling, and then deploy out to SharePoint. Something else to try. Yeah.
Or I can just go in here and create the agent for her, get permissions to those folders, and then share the agent with her. That's the other way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, our pleasure.
All right. Well, we've hit our time. This was the most interactive session I've had in a long time. I appreciate all the great questions. I know a lot of people have additional questions that they might have. I'm just showing on my screen. We just launched some new on-demand Copilot Studio Labs. They appear to be free. And we also are happy to continue conversations with you if you want to fill out this form and have someone reach out to you. Or, of course, you can always reach out to the person who invited you to this webinar. And I just want to say, thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been tremendous. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.